Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. No, no.
Yes. Hare Krishna.
Hare Bo Prabhus.
Hare
How are you?
Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Waiting for
Is there another
Hare
one?
Krishna
Is
Maharaj.
there another small one?
Yes, sir. You want to begin?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Maharaj.
Hare Bo. Hare Bo Maharaj.
Okay, it's minutes to 6. So just see if anybody else comes on. Did you see Candidate?
Yes, it was great.
Save
Did
the
you
link.
watch?
No, I didn't have time, but it's recorded, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Where do I get the link from?
For the recorded video.
Yeah.
If you I assume that if you follow the link which was in the message, it will take you there. If not, I can always post the link.
All right, I'll try the message first then.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Okay, so we're starting with the Bhagavatam overview again. And we can just with the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Om
Namo
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. Yeah, so we just recap so far. And first chapter we dealt with the qualities or the qualification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the qualification of the Bhagavatam and the disciplic. Squeak in here. And there's 6 questions. One was about Bhakti. Just mute that one. That one was about Bhakti. 2 questions first about Bhakti, then about, the 2 different types of avatars that come. The Guna avatars, not the Guna avatars, what do you call them? The creators. Then last we did the Leela avatars, Purusha avatars and Leela avatars. And then all the answers were given in the 2nd and 3rd chapter. And we said that Lord Krishna comes to cover those in the mode of goodness. So then we started the 4th chapter about, asking about Shaunaka Rishi was asking about 3 questions. The origin of the Bhagavatam, Maharaj Parikshit's history, and the history of Shukadeva Goswami. So these were all answered. Well, first of all, he started answering the Srimad Bhagavatam. And, and this is the whole conversation in chapter 4, 5, and 6, where he's contemplating that he's not satisfied even though he's compiled all the Vedas. And then Narada Muni comes and said, you've not spoken about the Supreme Lord or Bhakti. He explains how he achieved Bhakti through, as an example. And then he left, and then Vyasadeva started to, meditate and how to, change the Srimad Bhagavatam to include Krishna. And then he taught it to his son, Shukadeva Goswami. So that's called it.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. The son of Drona punished. So it starts to relate about Maharaj Parikshit, and this is the history starting right from, you know, when Ashvatthama tried to kill the sleeping sons of Draupadi. He did kill them actually, and then they released him and took away his caste, and then he sent another Brahmashtra to try and kill Parikshit in the womb. What a rascal, eh? And so at that point, it's in the 8th chapter, Uttara comes to Krishna and asks for protection. Krishna protects the embryo. But then Queen Kunti is also there, and she starts to ask to offer the prayers, which are now formed a book called Teachings of Queen Kunti, how to become a devotee, in other words. End of the 8th chapter then is where Yudhishthira is lamenting for having to kill so many Kshatriyas on the battlefield. And Narada Muni and the sages can't satisfy him, neither Krishna. So then they go to the battlefield where Bhishma Dev is lying on the bed of arrows waiting to leave this world. And this is where Krishna glorifies his devotee, because Bhishma Dev preaches different levels of Dharma and convinces Yudhishthira, so he feels enthusiastic to rule take up the throne. And so at that point, Krishna doesn't have to stay any longer. He starts to go back to Dwarka, and then he enters Dwarka. That's chapter 10 and 11. So it's a little bit of a diversion from the story of Parikshit, but it's important. And then in the 13th chapter, which we dealt with last week, in the 12th chapter, first was the 12th chapter is Parikshit Maharaj, the birth of Parikshit Maharaj. And, it's where Yudhishthira hires Brahmins, the Vipras. The Vipras are the one who materially have knowledge. The Vaishnavas are the one who have knowledge of the Supreme Personality of God, it's spiritual. So Vipras, then Brahmins, transcendental knowledge, then Vaishnavas, Krishna, knowledge about the Supreme Lord. And so the Vipras, extol the future glories of King Parikshit. He's got so many glories that they relate all these glories to specific glories that the previous kings had, who are very great kings. So he was an exceptional king. So then this chapter ends, and then the 13th chapter starts where Vidura comes back after being on pilgrimage, after being kicked out of the palace by Duryodhana, and he's been taught by Maitreya Rishi about Bhakti Yoga. And so at this point, although he's been preaching to Dhritarashtra all his life to give up this process, to take up the process of devotional service and stop his enmity to the Pandavas, he now realizes that he's on his heels. He's living in the house of his enemy who he tried to kill. And, Mullah said, aren't you ashamed of yourself? This is shameless activity. Get out immediately. Your teeth are falling out. You can't hear, mucus is coming into your throat. That's, death's very near. And so he told him to go and use the rest of his life for self-realization. And so Gandhari went also with him. So he explains how he achieved a wonderful result. He became freed from the material energy. Then we went on to where we are now, which is the 14th chapter. And in the 12th chapter at the end, after the Parikshit's birth and all the celebrations were over, Krishna left and went back to Dwarka for the second time, but this time he took Arjuna. And so Arjuna, he'd been gone for a long time, and Yudhishthira started to see bad omens. And so he was thinking there's something untoward happened, and he suspected Lord Krishna had left the world. And then he approached Bhima to get Bhima's thoughts on the matter. And while they're discussing, then eventually Arjuna comes back, and Yudhishthira can see on his face that he's completely, decimated. There's tears in his eyes. His face is shriveled up. He's lost all his pallor. And so, but he didn't ask him because, he doesn't want to lose the association of the Lord. When there's some bad news, you tend to delay bad news. And so Yudhishthira is trying to delay the inevitable. And he starts asking about the Yadus, how are they faring? How is Balaram? Like that. And eventually he has to ask the question at the end of the chapter, how is Lord Krishna? Is he still with us? And this ends the 13th. I thought in the 13th chapter, to make it a little bit interactive, we could, not in the 13th chapter, in the 15th chapter. 14th chapter, is it? That's 14, sorry. We could just read a little bit if you wanted. Actually, we're about the 15th. We'll read a little bit in the 15th. Some interesting points which may stick and like that. So in the 15th chapter, it's where Arjuna starts to express his feelings to Yudhishthira, telling him that person who has cheated me, the Supreme Lord, left. He was the source of all my happiness in this world and all my success in this world. He specifically relates to how he was able to defeat so many great warriors on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He even defeated Indra, his own father. And he says that this was all by the grace of the Supreme Lord. And this is a lesson for us, actually. Arjuna recalls Lord Krishna's favors and intimate protection. So in chapter 15, if you've got your Srimad Bhagavatam or your mobile smartphone, if you've got this 15th chapter in the first, from text 7 to 17, all the opulences Arjuna had that gave him in order to carry out his service. Everybody's got theirs ready, they can start reading. I'll not ask you, you can just, if you read a verse at a time, read a translation at a time, then we can go on to the next devotee. Has anybody got their Bhagavatam ready? Or is this a surprise?
Mine
No,
is
that is ready.
I've got it ready, Mark.
We have it.
All right. So starting chapter 15, text 7.
Oh, this one. You read.
Shall I start, Maharaj? Shall I start?
Yes.
You start.
You can start, then Karshana, then
Which canto? It's chapter 15, which canto?
which
The first canto.
First canto,
18.
chapter 15, text 7.
Canto 1.
Okay.
Well, we read one verse each.
Yeah, just read a verse each. Give everyone.
You want the purport?
No.
Just the verses.
Yeah.
Okay, so text 7. Only by his merciful strength was I able to vanquish all the lusty princes assembled at the palace of King Drupada for the selection of the bridegroom. With my bow and arrow, I could pierce the fish target and thereby gain the hand of Draupadi.
Karshana.
Because he was near me, it was possible for me to conquer with great dexterity the powerful king of heaven, Indradev, along with his demigod associates, and thus thus enable the fire god to devastate the Kandava forest. And only by his grace was the demon named Maya saved from the blazing Kandava forest. And thus we could build our assembly house of wonderful architectural workmanship, where all the princes assembled during the performance of Raja Surya Yagya and paid you tributes.
Party messages.
Your respectable younger brother, who possesses the strength of 10,000 elephants, killed by his grace Jarasandh, whose feet were worshipped by many kings. These kings had been brought for sacrifice in Jarasandha's Mahabhairava Yagna, but they were thus released. Later they paid tribute to your majesty.
Goridas.
It was he only who loosened the hair of all the wives of the miscreants who dared open the cluster of your queen's hair, which had been nicely dressed and sanctified for the great Rajasuya sacrificial ceremony. At that time, she fell down at the feet of Lord Krishna with tears in her eyes.
Roshan Peru, have you got a Bhagavatam? If not, don't worry.
Which text? I'm lost.
So it's chapter 15. So just find chapter 15. The first
Yeah, I'm in chapter 15.
Yeah. So it's text 10. Sorry, text 11.
Text 11.
Text 11. He protected us when we ran into trouble, being indulged in the forest by the intrigue of the enemies associated with Durvasa Muni. Is this the right text?
I think it's chapter 8.
It's a text 11, but I'm going through online. It's not online book.
All right, I'll just read it while everybody gets composed. During our exile, Durvasa Muni, who eats with the 10,000 disciples, intrigued with our enemies to put us in danger, trouble. At that time, he, Lord Krishna, simply by accepting the remnants of food, saved us. By his accepting food thus, the assembly of Munis, while bathing in the river, felt sumptuously fed, and all the 3 worlds were also satisfied. If anybody's ready to read, just read. Text 12.
I take it, it was by his influence only that in a fight I was able to astonish the personality of God, Lord Shiva, and his wife, the daughter of Mount Himalaya. Thus he, Lord Shiva, became pleased with me and awarded me his own weapon. Other demigods also delivered their respective weapons to me, and in addition I was able to reach the heavenly planets in this present body and was allowed a half-elevated seat.
Okay, 13. Vishwadevaro, have you got Bhagavatam?
13th.
13, yeah.
When I stayed for some days as a guest in the heavenly planets, all the heavenly demigods, including the king Indradeva, took shelter of my arms, which were marked with the Gandiva bow, to kill the demon named Nivatakavacha, O king, descendant of Ajamitha. At the present moment, I am bereft of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose influence I was so powerful.
Ashish, do you want to read? 14.
The military strength of the Kauravas was like an ocean, in which there dwelt many invincible existences, and thus it was insurmountable. But because of his friendship, I, seated on the chariot, was able to cross over it. And only by his grace was I able to regain the cows and also collect by force many helmets of the kings, which were bedecked with jewels that were sources of all brilliance.
Hey, that's Peru. Read 15.
Overveiw, yeah, I'll read 15. It was he only who withdrew the duration of life from everyone, and who in the battlefield withdrew the speculative power and strength of enthusiasm from the great military phalanx made by the Kauravas, headed by Bhishma, Karna, Drona, and Salya, etc. Their arrangement was expert and more than adequate, but he, Lord Sri Krishna, while going forward, did all this.
Okay, 16. Mahamantra, do you want to read 16? Mahamantra.
Okay, great generals like Bhishma, Drona, Karna, Bhurishrava, Shushama, Salya, Jayadratha, and Valika all directed their invincible weapons against me. But by his, Lord Krishna's, grace, they could not even touch a hair on my head. Similarly, Prahlad Maharaj, the supreme devotee of Lord Nrsingadev, was unaffected by the weapons the demon used against him.
Okay, and last one. Varasha Mataji, can you read 17?
Yeah. It was by his mercy only that my enemies neglected to kill me when I descended from my chariot to get water for my thirsty horses, and it was due to my lack of esteem for my Lord that I dared engage him as my chariot driver, for he is worshipped and offered services by the best men to attain salvation.
So, you know, Arjuna was understanding that he was bereft of all his power. You know, this is how Krishna works. In the material world, he uses his devotee and empower them to do a certain service. So a devotee should never think that, you know, it's our power. This is illusion. In fact, every living entity in creation is empowered by Krishna. But specifically, a devotee becomes empowered to do a certain service. And if we can remember that, we can be detached. This service, and if I don't use it in Krishna's service, it'll be taken away. In this way, we can keep a little bit of sanity in our lives and, you know, remain steady in devotional service. Very important instruction. So, you know, at that point, Arjuna just started to pacify himself by the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita that Lord Krishna gave him, and he started to become look inward, and he achieved the transcendental platform. And so at this Yudhisthira, he lost all, you know, enthusiasm for staying on the planet, and it explains how he relinquished his royal garments and ornaments. He became fully unattached. He amalgamated his existence of offering the senses into the mind, the life into the breathing. He offered the apana and excretion into death, and body of 5 elements into Brahman, 3 gunas, and then into Brahman. So what he did, he started, you know, not reflecting on being in bodily consciousness anymore. And he wore torn clothes. He stopped eating, he stopped speaking, and like a deaf and dumb man, he just left, just like Dhritarashtra left. So this is what happens when we understand the, you know, the seriousness of devotional service, or the seriousness of spiritual emancipation. Everything else becomes secondary, become really focused. And also his brothers felt the same, and they just tied up all their, well, I don't think they even did that. They just followed Yudhisthira, and they all achieved, you know, the goal of life, Lord Krishna. And, you know, Queen Kunti was also listening, and she became also detached and started performing full-on devotional service. Vidura went to Prabhas Kshetra and left this world. He went back to his post as Yamaraj. Draupadi and Subhadra, the wives of Arjuna and the Pandavas, they also attained the same results as the husbands, it said. So this is Falashruti. Falashruti is the subject of the departure of the sons of Pandu. It's fully auspicious and perfectly pure. Anyone who hears it with faith gains a devotion to the Lord. So that brings us to the end of the Pandavas' timely retire. So now we go back to Parikshit Maharaj, and now he's king. He's been put, in the last chapter, Maharaj Yudhishthira posted him as king of the world. Vajra, one of the sons of Krishna, he put in charge of Mathura and that area. And so Maharaj Parikshit then, he ruled immaculately. And one day, in brief, it explains how he saw the personal form of Kali beating a cow. And that he punished Kali, but he didn't kill him. So then, this Shaunaka Rishi was thinking, why didn't he kill him? That's the worst act that you can perform, to actually mutilate a cow. And so he asked Parikshit Maharaj, why did Parikshit simply punish Kali but not kill him? Please describe all these incidents if they are related to topics of the Lord. So the devotee is only interested if it's related to Lord Krishna. And so, and there's one nice verse here in 7 and 8. It explains how that, by speaking this subject matter about Lord Krishna, it says that it attracts Yamaraj. And Yamaraj leaves his post and comes to listen about topics of Lord Krishna, and we're safe. There's another verse in the Bhagavatam which says the same thing, that Ayu Harate Vaipumsham, that both by rising and setting, the sun decreases the life of everybody, who except one who's hearing the all good topics of the all good personality of Godhead. So this is the potency of just what we're doing now. We can't understand it, but it's there. So then Parikshit Maharaj, when Lord Krishna left, then immediately the age of Kali started to take over. And so he could see the signs. So he set off from his capital and he went out conquering all directions, defeating all evil forces. And then he started hearing in different places about the glories of the Pandavas. And he heard about Lord Krishna's affection to the Pandavas. And, he became very much attracted by that. He was overwhelmed with devotion, it says. So this is where it changes the scene. That it just, Parikshit's still traveling and conquering, but then it goes to a conversation between two living entities. Dharani and Dharma. Dharma is the bull, and Dharani is the cow. And, Dharani asks Dharma, what's the problem? You've lost 3 legs, have been mutilated, and the third one is, not so strong. And so then there's a whole section there where he starts to talk about the age of Kali, and it's the age of Kali which has actually appeared. And there's one verse in the 12th canto, it says, Ataschanu dinam dharma, satyam socham, shama daya, kalina balina rajan, nakshant yahu vinakshanti. That, day by day, due to the powerful influence of the age of Kali, all these qualities, good qualities, will be reduced. What's those qualities? Satyam, truthfulness. Socham, cleanliness. Shama, tolerance. Daya, mercy. Bala, physical strength. Ayu, duration of life, like that. And so, this is what, Dharma is alluding to. It's the age of Kali, and this is why I'm suffering like this. Sorry, I got it the wrong way around. Dharani is asked by Dharma why they're suffering, and she expresses this. And then, so this is a question by Dharma. It's saying, is it because of this? Is it this? Is it this? And then she says, it's the biggest thing is the pain of separation from Lord Krishna. And at that point, he comes back to Maharaj Parikshit, who's traveling, and it starts the next chapter, punishment and reward of Kali. You know, Maharaj Parikshit, it was at Kurukshetra actually, and he saw the, Kali personified, dressed as a Shudra. I was listening to one tape by Prabhupada. He said that the Shudra was black and he was dressed in, a king's outfit. And but he was actually acting not like a king, but like a Shudra. And Prabhupada says that this is the symptoms of the age of Kali. So many people will take up posts and they will look like leaders, but they won't act like leaders. And he said in particular, he says a Shudra is black. In India, Prabhupada once mentioned it before in one lecture that depending on a person's colour, you can tell how elevated he is to some degree. He says the Brahmins, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas were generally a lighter colour, but this Kali, he was black, so he could tell he was a Shudra. And you could tell by his activities. And so he approached him, who are you? You appear strong and you kill the helpless under my protection. You dress like a king, Naradev, but you are acting like a Shudra. You dare beat the innocent in seclusion because Lord Krishna and Arjuna are out of sight. Thus you are a culprit and deserve to be killed. So then he approaches both Dharani and Dharma and tries to pacify them and say, don't worry, I'll sort this Kali out. So that's the next few verses. And he says the first duty of a king is, the king's prime duty or the leader is to subdue the suffering of the subjects. So that's the first duty of the king. Maharaj Parikshit asks the bull about the perpetrator. This is an interesting point. He's saying, who's caused this suffering? Why are you on 3 legs? Why is 3 legs being, mutilated? And so, there's a discussion goes on between Dharma, the bull, and Parikshit at this point. And what does the bull say? He says that we do not know the root cause of our suffering, being bewildered by different opinions of the theoretical philosophers. And he talks about it doesn't mention it in the Bhagavatam, but the Advaita bodies. One's own self is the problem. The Daiva Gyan, superhuman powers, Mimamsha, Karma, Lokayatikas is in the Bhagavad Gita, nature, and Vaishnavas. No one can ascertain the cause of distress by argumentation, imagination, or words. And so he was actually saying that it's none of these things. And, Parikshit couldn't say, who is this? He's talking like, these are the real principles of religion that I say, who's the perpetrator? He says, one who accuses the perpetrator is actually as bad as a perpetrator. What does that mean? It means he's in Maya. He's seeing the external as the cause. The external is not the cause, is a deeper cause. And we can say it's karma, so many things, but ultimately the cause is Lord Krishna. Not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Supreme. So this is what Dharma was saying. Anyway, we did this in Bhagavad Gita, the 3 doers. Krishna's one doer, the individual's another doer, and karma's another doer. So work that one out. But ultimately, Krishna is the super sanctioner. He's the real doer. Nothing happens unless he actually sanctions it. Anyway, we're getting bogged down a little bit, but it's an interesting point, this. That's why I thought I'd dwell on it. And then Kali, understanding his situation, just like the coward that he is, you know, you always find bullies like that. You know, Shiv Ram Maharaj once said to somebody, you know, a bully doesn't like being bullied. And so this is, you know, Kali, he doesn't like the situation at all. And so, you know, Maharaj Parikshit asked, he was just about to kill Kali. And it says, Kali ironically surrendered. You would never think a person like Kali would surrender, but he saw the situation. At least he had that much intelligence. And so, you know, as soon as, this is the nature of a real Kshatriya, when he sees somebody is actually surrendered, he'll actually protect him if he surrenders. So he protected him. That's why he didn't kill Kali. That's why the initial question of Shaunaka Rishi in the beginning, at the beginning of the chapter. So Maharaj Parikshit, he told Kali to leave the kingdom, and Kali said, everywhere's your kingdom. You know, you have to give me somewhere to live. I'm one of your subjects now. You promised to protect me. So he said, okay, I'll give you 4 places. Can anybody remember what they are?
Where gambling is taking place, where intoxication is taking place, where the animals are being killed, slaughterhouses.
And illicit sex.
And prostitution, yeah, prostitution.
Yeah, and so then what did Kali say? He says, there's nowhere in your kingdom where these things will flourish. He says, so I still don't have anywhere to go. You know, you've got to give me another one. They said, okay, I'll give you where gold, listen, it's not just gold itself. Maharaj Parikshit permitted him to live in a place where there is gold that gives rise to falsity. So that means where there's no real gold, but there's, you know, where gold is used for the wrong things and where gold is substituted by, you know, other currency. So when it's misused and it's substituted. And so therefore, you know, Kali had somewhere to reside. So he says that Brahmins, Vaishnavas and devotees should always make sure that, you know, not a farthing is spent except for the service of the Lord. Otherwise, it attracts Kali. When we talk about the service of the Lord, that's a wide subject matter. So, you know, we shouldn't... Then Maharaj Parikshit re-established the lost 3 legs, austerity, cleanliness, mercy of the bull, and improved the earth's situation. So that ended the 17th chapter. So Maharaj Parikshit carried on ruling, and eventually he was out hunting. And sometimes when you're out in the field, you know, you don't have enough food or enough water, so he became exhausted and he became thirsty. And so he arrived at one hermitage of one of the rishis. It was, what was his name? Anybody remember?
Shringi?
Samik.
Samik.
Samik Rishi. And Samik Rishi was in meditation. He was fully in samadhi. And so he didn't move usually the Vedic system is when anybody comes to the house, it's called atiti. You know what atiti means? It means uninvited guest. But even if he's uninvited, we should still treat him like he was invited. And so this is what Maharaj Parikshit expected. And when he saw that the sage didn't move, and he didn't respect, it was a natural thing that at least you should be given a place to sit, some water and some sweet words, even if you're the poorest of the poor. And so he wasn't given any of those things, and he lost his temper, and he picked up with his hook of his bow a dead stake that was nearby, and wrapped it round the shoulders round the neck of Samik Rishi. And of course, the sage never moved; he wasn't aware of it, and then he angrily left the residence. But on the way, he was thinking, after some time, when the anger subsides, you're thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that. This wasn't the proper act of a noble king. So this chapter, in the 18th chapter, the link from previously is that we were talking about, the birth and activities of Maharaj Parikshit. Now we're talking about his demise, how he leaves this world. And so Maharaj Parikshit, he could understand that age of Kali was a bad age, but he could also understand it was a good age. Does anybody know why?
Mahamantra. The easiest method.
Yes, that's one answer, actually. That's given in the 12th canto. What's that? There's a verse in the 12th canto.
Kalir dosanidhe rajan.
Yasti ekam mahanganam. Yeah. Kirtanatavi Krishnasya. Mukta sangam param rajat. That the age of Kali is an ocean of faults, but there's one good quality, is the chanting of the Maha Mantra. But that's not the answer to this one. So what is it?
What is the question, Maharaj?
Maharaj Parikshit understood it was the age of Kali, but he wasn't inimical to the age of Kali. He wasn't inimical to Kali. He could understand in one respect it's actually a good age. And so he took the good part.
Is it because people in Kali can achieve Lord easily, more easily than?
No, if you haven't read it, you won't know probably. But it says that.
Is it Kalau Doshanidhe Rajan Asti Eko Mahan?
We've done that one.
Okay. Krute Yadhyayato Vishnu Tretayam Yajato.
No, that's not it.
Oh, I don't know.
He said that this is in the which verse is it? Verse 7. He says that if we think of something good, even if we don't do it, then we get the results. So just thinking of doing the right things, then we get the result. It's a special benediction in the age. If we think about, worshipping the Lord, then, we'll be encouraged that way. But if we do something wrong, then we won't get the bad result. We won't get the reaction unless we actually do it. He says this is the difference in the age of Kali. So, and then the sages they wanted to ask, what happened after that? What happened after he put the snake around Samik Rishi's neck? And first of all, they started to glorify the speaker, who was Sutta Goswami. And there's one very nice, famous verse here. He says, Tulyami Levanapi Nasvagam Punarjana Bhavam Bhagavat Sangi Sangasya Marchanam Kimutashishaha. Says, the moment's association with a pure devotee cannot be compared to elevation to heavenly planets, elevation to the heavenly kingdom, or material opulences in this material world. It's a moment's association. Tulyami Levanapi.
Maharaj, what is the number of this verse?
13.
13. Okay, thank you.
So this is, anybody, is it remind you of another verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita? Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastri Lava Mata Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhaya. A moment's association with a pure devotee can give one complete perfection. So the sages were understanding their good fortune in being able to hear from this Sutta Goswami, and they were glorifying in that way. So then, it comes back to the scene where, Parikshit, where Shringi, the son of Samik Rishi, hears from his friends who he's playing with, he's a Brahmin boy. But he was very well educated in Brahminical principles. He'd been trained very nicely and he was extremely powerful, even at that young age. But he was immature, he was only a boy. And therefore his reasoning and his discrimination had not developed properly. He hadn't got the experience. And so when he heard that his father had been insulted, he actually immediately became angry and started calling, who are these, dogs at the house of the Brahmins? They say, I'll just read the verse. It says, the kings are designated as watchdogs by the Brahmins. How can the dogs that guard the door enter the house and dine with the master? So he was really upset and he was really calling Maharaj Parikshit. And eventually he touched the Kaushik water, the Kaushik river, and he issued a curse. He says, from the 7th day henceforth, this Maharaj Parikshit will be killed by a snake bird called Takshaka. So, and then of course, Shringi went back to see his father, and his father came out of the trance. And when he told him what had happened, his father was completely shocked. He couldn't believe it. He said, you've actually, you've cursed an innocent person. He said, not only that, for a simple thing like being thirsty. Anybody who's thirsty, they're likely to become angry. But actually, earlier on in this chapter, it says that we shouldn't think that Maharaj Parikshit became angry. He said it was the will of Krishna. Krishna covered him so that he could actually, so the Bhagavatam could play its part out. So this is what happens sometimes. We shouldn't become disturbed or bewildered when we see that devotees seem to act out of character sometime in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But we should remember that, Krishna is also controlling the situation, and this may happen. Anyway, and so he said, and he starts to glorify the position of the king. He said that the results of abolishing the monarch, the Lord is represented by the monarchical regime. When this is abolished, the world becomes filled with thieves and unprotected people scattered like lambs. And, Prabhupada used to say that the present democracy is not a proper democracy because people who are voting the Democrats in, they're not qualified to vote anybody in because they just want sense gratification. So a saintly king is the best leadership because he'll guide everybody to the goal of life and protect everybody in that way. He says, great social disruption will follow. People will be killed and injured. Animals, wealth, and women will be stolen. We shall be responsible for these sins. So this is the degradation of the Brahminical order. This is when Kali Yuga really set in. When the Brahmins and the leaders don't act properly, they're called the head of society. And when the head of society doesn't act properly, when the head's not working properly, the rest of the body doesn't function properly. So the rest of society, the Kshatris, Brahmins, and Shudras don't function properly. So it was it wasn't just a matter of cursing an innocent king, but the results of it was, disastrous. Then Samik Rishi prayed for his son to the Lord. He says, he's only a boy, he didn't know what he was doing. And at that, it says, there's a nice verse towards the end of the chapter. Devotees are so forbearing that despite being defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves, although they are capable to do so. So this is the nature of a devotee. He never uses his power against anybody unnecessarily. He could have actually counteracted the curse, but 2 reasons he didn't, which we'll hear about shortly. One is because he didn't want to. He wanted the plan of the Lord to be carried out. And the other one was that when the messenger came to tell him from Samik Rishi sent a messenger to tell Maharaj Pariksit about the curse, and he decided not to act on it. And he saw that he'd already been thinking, I've done wrong, I deserve some punishment. This punishment will stop me from doing the wrong things again. This is how he was thinking. And when actually he came with the message that he'd been punished, that he'd been cursed, he was actually relieved. He was somewhat happy that he'd got a reaction. And he didn't want to, counteract the curse for another reason, because he thought that Shringi's father, Samik Rishi, will be so embarrassed that if I go to his hermitage, it'll be too much for him. He's already embarrassed. If I go there now and ask for the curse to be reversed, it'll be a double embarrassment for him. And then obviously, hearing this, he gives up his kingdom. He goes to the banks of the Ganges, and he decides to fast from water and food until he leaves this world. And at that time, all the great sages from the higher planets, they came to that place on the banks of the Ganges to see Maharaj Pariksit, such a great soul. He said they came because they knew that in due course, Sukadev Goswami would come and they'd hear the speaking of the Bhagavatam. But, Pariksit Maharaj welcomed everybody very nicely, and he told to them that it was his good fortune that so many great sages had come to help him. And so he asked them for a benediction. He said that, he asked them a question, after proper deliberation, please tell me of the unallied duty of everyone in all circumstances, and specifically a dying person. So it's practically the whole of the rest of the Srimad Bhagavatam is centered around these 2 questions by Maharaj Pariksit. What's and also what specific duty is it for everybody, especially one who's on the verge of death? So, the sages, they didn't really know. They were talking between one another, and they were coming from different disciplines, different kinds of transcendentalists, and they couldn't agree. And so immediately they started thinking about Shukadev Goswami. And then they looked down the road, and Shukadev Goswami came walking down the road. And he says he was followed by women and boys who were mocking him because he was only wearing the 4 directions. He didn't have any clothes on because he was completely self-realized. He didn't identify with the body. And then, Maharaj Pariksit stood up and welcomed him. And he said, it's only because I'm a member of the Pandava dynasty that you've been sent. Lord Krishna has mercifully sent you because I'm the son of the Pandavas. And as soon as the women and young boys saw how everybody stood up and paid their obeisances to this, Shukadev Goswami, then they thought, whoa, we're making a big mistake here, and they retreated. And he said to Maharaj Shukadev Goswami, simply by remembering you, our house has become sanctified. Then what to speak of seeing you, touching you, washing your holy feet, and offering you a seat? Okay. So we're coming to the end now, and there's then there was a few questions, important questions asked at the end of this chapter, which ends the first canto, and questions by Parikshit. And I'll read them to you. O Guru of Saints, show the way of perfection for all persons, especially one who is about to die. Please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember and worship, and also what he should not do. It is said that you hardly stay in the house of men long enough to milk a cow. Thus being questioned sweetly by the king, Shukadev Goswami, who knew the principles of religion, began to reply. So that's where we're starting the second canto. And we'll start that next Thursday. So is there anything anyone would like to discuss further on that? Anything which is not clear? We only went briefly.
Maharaj, can we do a little bit slower? It seems that we are going very fast.
Well, I don't know how fast they go because there's overviews and overviews. Some overviews, they got, they've finished the 10th canto by now.
Oh, really?
But, this overview is a little bit, telling you a little about what's happening inside. But I don't mind, I'll go at the speed that the devotees want because we're not in a rush. I started this because this pandemic was on and it would be nice Bhagavad Gita for everybody. And I thought, I often thought myself that I've never really done an overview of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it would be good for me to do as well.
It is really nice, Maharaj. I'm really enjoying that because I'm finishing quite late with the work, so I'm not actively participating, but I'm really relishing that. It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. I just added this week a little bit of reading by the devotees so that, they feel engaged. But I'm prepared to do what will be, satisfying to the devotees. So if anybody's got anything, if anybody would like to go slower or would like to keep the same pace, let me know.
I gain a lot personally from hearing you go over things because personally I gain a lot from hearing you repeat things, when you do the overviews. That helps me a lot because I tend to remember things and then forget. So the repetition is very helpful in all the courses that you do for us in all the different subjects. And the speed, anything you tell us about is really, really, really helpful. So I don't mind. I mean, I personally can't keep up with the reading because I'm too slow at reading. But I really enjoy the subject matter and the way you're sharing it with us. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll just give my thoughts from the way I feel when I'm doing it. I feel that it's quite an effort to do an overview because the onus is on me to do 90% of the talking, which I don't mind if devotees are satisfied with that. And I'm just frightened that if we go into it too detailed, it won't be an overview, but we'll get confused. If it's an overview, it has to be sufficiently an overview so that we don't lose the thread. And I'm just highlighting certain points within each chapter, which, are specifically, important points that may help us to, tie it all together and remember certain chapters. If there's actually, like hooks, a story within the chapter.
Yeah.
But really, to get the benefit of this, you have to, read through those chapters, the translations, and then it becomes so much easier to follow. You've gone through it and then you hear it again, then it becomes, more easier to actually digest. But it's not a course. It's just you know, some Krishna Katha. And
Of course, yeah.
keep Yamaraj at bay while they're listening, at least.
Maharaj, what was that quality you said, which is good in Kali Yuga, earlier on?
That any good deed we think about, it'll bear good results. If we think about doing good, then, you know, we'll get good karma. And anything bad we think about, then we won't get the reaction until we actually do it.
Ah, okay.
Where usually in previous ages, if you thought evil, then you get a reaction. I mean, sometimes as devotees, we do get a reaction if we think wrongly. You know, I think, you know, we're under a different energy. You know, Krishna's taking personal care, and sometimes you start thinking a certain way, and then you'll find there's something which wakes you up. Wait a minute. But in general, usually it's in this age we have to do something before we get the bad result. It's a good job, isn't it? Okay, we can stop there then.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So we'll meet next week.
Thank you, Maharaj.
At 7 o'clock. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you.
Haribol. Haribol.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you.